Hi, today we are going to look at one of the ways that you can make infused herbal oils. The two primary methods are the slow way and the long way. The long way, and I'll go into more detail on this, including measurements and weights and fresh to dry herbs and ratios and all that kind of stuff on my blog, and I'll put the link to the blog down below in the details. Okay, so there's the long way, where you put the herbs in a container. I usually use a glass mason jar, cover with oil, put a lid on it, stick it in a dark place, usually a couple of herbs per sunlight. Put them in a dark place for a while, and then let the constituents of the herbs infuse into the oil slowly, and then strain it out. Or you can do it the quick way, which is what I'm going to do today. I'm making an oil up for a friend of mine. In this case, I'm using mostly dried herbs. I have some dried red rose petals right there, dried calendula flowers. I have the whole heads in there, including the what do you call it, the part that has the seeds in it. Some dried chamomile, and here's some fresh chamomile that I picked a couple of days ago, and I let it wilt to get all the moisture out of it. Depending on who you ask, some people chop the fresh herb and put it right in. Some people recommend wilting it and getting some of the moisture out, so you don't get that water sinking to the bottom of your oil and potentially causing mold. But anyway, so I let it wilt because I'm using other dry herbs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a double boiler, which in this case, so I actually have some light in my kitchen since the sun's shining right now. I have a 4-cup Pyrex measuring cup sitting in a pan of water, and I use a double boiler to prevent the oil from scorching. So I'm just going to add my herbs, my roses, my calendula, my dried chamomile, and my fresh chamomile. Whoops. Knock it over. And then I'm gonna, there are very specific measurements you can use to get a consistent product. In this particular case, this is for a friend of mine, and I'm just gonna let my intuition go with me here, and I am just gonna pour in my oil. This is olive oil, and I'm going to generously cover, because dried herbs are going to be more potent than fresh wet herbs, more concentrated. I gave it a generous covering of oil, and like I said, I'll go into ratios and that sort of thing on my blog. And so I have a gentle heat under the water. I want it to simmer but not boil, and because we don't want to cook the herbs, we just want the oil to be warm so that it can draw the essential oils and all the other chemical constituents of the herbs that give them their healing properties. We want those to be drawn out into the warm oil. We don't want to actually deep fry our herbs. So I'll be back in a little bit, and once it's had some time to infuse, and then I'll show you how I'm gonna strain the herbs out. Okay, it's been a couple hours. I heated it until I could start to smell the herbs in the oil, and as you can see, I've lost some of my light. And then I turned the heat off and I let it cool down. And now what I'm going to do is I just have a colander strainer inside a bowl, sitting in a bowl, and I'm using a glass bowl. My strainer is metal, but I'm going to have to be okay with that. And then what I'm going to do is just pour my herbs and oil in here and let it strain through. trying to get some more light there so you can see. And it'll take a while. And as the oil, you know, when most of the oil has gone through, I'll pick the cloth up into a bundle and I'll squeeze, you know, the excess out. You could use a mesh strainer lined with cheesecloth, or some people like to use coffee filters. I have several pieces of just cotton fabric that I use and then I wash. And I forgot what I was just going to say. But anyway, oh, then once it has, let's see if we can see this. No, not really, it's too dark. I'll come back and I'll show you. But then what we do, or what I do, what I like to do, is once it is strained, I'll put it in a jar or some sort of container. I prefer glass, so I often use mason jars. And I'll let it sit for several days, or however long it seems like it's taking, and let any particulate matter that's still in there settle to the bottom, or if I've used any fresh herbs, let any water that came out of the herbs, let it settle to the bottom, and then I'll decant off the clear oil and leave, you know, a little bit in the bottom that has, little oil in the bottom that has whatever residue from plant matter or little bubbles of water or whatever down in the bottom. We'll be back in a little bit. Okay, time to squeeze the excess oil out. And so I'm just pulling the edges of the fabric up and squeezing it out. And then the residue you can put on your compost. Well, unless you have a compost pile that you don't like to put any kind of oils or fats in, because it is a little oily. Okay, squeezing that out. I'm going to set this aside. And okay, there's a little bit of stuff. There's a little cloud down in there. I don't know if you can see that. Hang on a second, let me wash my hands and I'll bring over the camera closer. Okay, I can't tell on this little itty bitty camera screen whether you can see that, but right down in there, so the oil's a little cloudy. So we're going to, I'm going to let this sit overnight and settle. And then tomorrow I will pour it off, being careful to leave the dregs behind in the bottom, and pour it into, decant it basically, which means pouring it off but leaving the dregs in the bottom, and into a glass jar. And then I'll let it sit a few days and see if anything else wants to settle out, and then I can take my next steps. Now then, the various sorts of things that you can do with an infused oil, if some of you are wondering, is you could just use it as an herb infused massage oil, or you could make a salve out of it. And a salve basically is hardening an oil with the addition of a waxy substance. I usually use beeswax, but there are other ways you can do it. Or you could use it as the oil base for a cream or a lotion. And there are probably other things that you could do to it, but those are the things that I usually think of. So that'll be it for our infused oil, and when I start making the salve, I will I'll be back and show you how I do that. Oh, now this particular oil, like I said, this is for a friend, and it's going to have some essential oils added to it, and specifically for scars, she's going to use it to help reduce the visibility of some scars. So hopefully that's going to work out real well for her, and I'll talk to you all later.